Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to be here today, but most importantly, I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have in just a few minutes about the importance of really pulling together a diverse pipeline of talent that can go into the opportunities of today and tomorrow in the financial services sector and the technology sector. In order to do that, I'm happy to have a distinguished panel of guests who cross both of those industries who are going to really help us go into a deep conversation about what they're realizing and seeing in their roles and how we can prepare our community to take advantage of those opportunities. So without further ado, I'm going to call up my panelists who are going to join me here on stage. We're going to have about 30 minutes to chat, and then we're going to take about 15 minutes or so to go into Q&A. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to write them down, take a mental note, and then we'll get to them just in a few minutes. So without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage Jim, Dele, and Walter. Please join me on the stage. So gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. And I'm really looking forward to taking a deep approach into some of the things that you're witnessing on a day-to-day in your roles, and most importantly, how could we prepare our community of black men to take advantage of the opportunities in tech and financial services. With that said, before we go into that, I want to give you all about 30 seconds to really introduce yourself to the audience and tell us about your role and what you're doing in your respective organizations. So, can you start first, and then we'll go down the line?
All right, so everyone, I'm Walter Freeman. I'm a director in corporate procurement at Apple. I have responsibility for our supplier diversity program, as well as some other procurement functions. And I'm excited to be here and happy to be here. I have 12 other Apple associates with me, so it's going to be a great day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dele Oladapo. I'm with Prudential. I run enterprise architecture and technology innovation. We've got Prudential colleagues here, and I'm proud of the sponsorship that Prudential provides. You know, from a role perspective, I lead IT departments in delivering solutions. But as of late, I've really started to try to meld my personal persona, whether it be in my fraternity activity, into the community. And I used to think that it was a compartmentalized approach to take, and I'm realizing that when you bring it all together, not only do you add more value for yourself and the community that you care about, but you actually add more company value. So thank you so much for having me.
And my name is Jim Gauthier. I am from Dell Technologies, and we have many of my colleagues here. I'm very privileged in that I have the distinct pleasure of leading our global solution strategy and advocacy teams around the world. So as you can imagine, having just gone through the world's largest technology merger, we're very pleased to not only be here, but we're really grateful to be a member of this panel and to share some of not only Dell Technologies experiences, but my personal experiences as a senior leader in technology.
Mm-hmm. Let's clap it up one last time for the panelists. So with that said, let's jump right into it. What is the status of black male representation in the technology and financial services industries, and how has it changed for the better or the worse? You can start. Yeah.
Well, at Apple, we have the benefit of all of our inclusion and diversity information is on our website, and so you can see all the numbers there. Our senior leadership has recognized that, to be candid, we need more black males. And so we're looking at increasing the pipeline. We have some efforts with K-12 programs and university programs. We're connected to 14 HBCUs. We recently had 34 HBCU interns on campus learning about the roles at Apple. So Thank you. So we recognize that there's growth needed, scalability is needed. We can do better. We're starting to get some real traction on those efforts to get better.
Yeah, and I'd say similar. the bottom line is not enough, right? I think that the answer is, unfortunately, we tend to be underrepresented in the good and then overrepresented in the bad. You know, from a pipelining perspective, I'm really proud of the work that we've done at Prudential with nonprofits like Perscolis and Workforce Opportunity Services. So we're bringing in a lot of diverse talent, both male and female, but when we look at the management ranks, when we look at the senior management ranks, there's a lot of underdevelopment there, there's a ton of opportunity there, and I'm looking forward to having discussions not only on what we're doing, but what you all will need to do so that we can change that dynamic.
So there's a phrase that we use at Dell, which is pleased but not satisfied. The simple answer is we could do a lot more, and we should do a lot more. Now, having said that, it is a priority for us. It's very clear that from a business perspective, having diverse thoughts, having diverse points of view, having a global view of that diversity actually really is good business. So yes, we've done a lot of really great things. I was just sharing with Walter and Deli the fact of at NSBE recently, we were honored to bring in 40 brand new engineers who are all African American. That's great. But if we look at it across multiple strata, if we look at it across multiple segments, and if we look at it across the senior leadership all the way to the entry, there's still a lot more that we can do.
So we heard pretty much all three of you say that there's more work to be done and it's not enough. So there's this area of opportunity. So my next question for the panel is going to be, why does increasing black male representation in the technology and financial services industry matter? And let's start at the end and then work our way back over to me.
So, we're big into facts and data. We're also very big into metrics. Here's one that everybody should walk away with. If you think about the number of computer science jobs that are going to be out there between now and 2021, there's going to probably be something on the order of about 1.3 million that we will not be able to fill. Not be able to fill. For those of you that are into percentages, that's roughly about 45%. So in essence, what we've got to do is not only find some programs. I'll give you two examples. And again, they're examples, but we have a lot more that we can do. One thing that we're doing, and since this is a technology conversation, is working with some high visibility universities like Northeastern. We have a program that we call Align. That is where we can take young men and women who traditionally have not been in STEM and actually put them in a program where they walk away now with a master's degree in that, in particular technology. We're doing the same thing with some historically black colleges in the Atlanta area, Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, where, from a Dell perspective, we are going out and training young men and women to ensure that, hey, look, if you want to become a sales maker, we're not only co-building that curriculum with them, but we're also making sure that once that they've graduated, there's a spot for them at Dell if they so choose to join, or if they so choose to go anywhere else. So those are just some of the things that we are doing, but more importantly, it's the reason why we have to do it.
Yeah. When I...
Clap it up for that.
When I think of the reason why it's important, whenever you want to win, you want to add people to the team that will allow you to be able to win. And when I think about the dynamic, particularly of black men who are in challenge scenarios, what it takes for them to even get into that corporate environment tends to be a scenario of overcoming obstacles that are unfair, overcoming family dynamics that are challenging. So the mental toughness that it takes to even navigate through the social environment that we're in actually gives you a different kind of talent pool that can allow that company to be successful. But I think the real question is, what action can we take? So, when I think about the role that I sit in now, I realize that I have to make sure that I have a larger allocation of my time connecting, whether it be mentoring people who are in the Peru, working in the schools and the communities that we have. We have a Project Alpha program in Newark, New Jersey with South 17th Street School, elementary school. And one of the students asked me on our first day there, why are you here? And I said very simply, God put me here to make sure that you get here as well. So fast forward 3 years from now, 3 years later, that same student just won our MLK oratorical contest and came in first place.
Wow.
So now I've said to him, now I've said to him, so your social dynamic doesn't matter anymore. Your gift has been revealed to you, and now you know that you have a gift that really most adults don't even have in terms of being able to articulate yourself. So now we have these same kids working in the program to get into a prep school. So it's really going to be, what are we doing in the community? How are you taking the NSBs, the fraternities, the church activity that you think is a personal, activity that you do from the side, integrate that into your career activity. But it's not just a matter of what we do when we're at senior levels, it's very much what you do at those entry levels. Have an expectation that your blessing to be able to move yourself forward is there. So if you're not reaching out to multiple people looking for mentorship, if you're not trolling LinkedIn profiles of people who are leaders in the department that you want to work in, then you're not putting enough energy into releasing your blessing. So, I think the value proposition is very simple. Black men have a propensity to be able to drive through challenges because they're faced with more challenges. Now the question is, how are you going to be creative at being able to tap into that pool?
At Apple, we have a saying where it says, inclusion inspires innovation. And I believe the black community as a whole has been one of the most innovative communities that's ever existed on God's green earth. And so we need to tap into that. Why should black men be involved with Apple and the other companies sitting on stage with me today? Because it raises the standard of living for everyone in their immediate and extended communities. Everyone in this room, the success you've had, you're sharing with family members and friends who at certain times need support. We need to be able to expand that network, raise the level of all standard of living for the black men. The folks that are with me today, we did a quick survey. People think technology roles are engineering roles. Well, at the table of the peers that I'm here today, I think there's 2 engineers. The rest are business degrees. So we have a sociology major who now does design for how you interface with the products that Apple makes. So let's get all that talent in. Let's not just focus on engineering. Let's recognize that if you're a creative person in any form or fashion, you should come to these companies because there's a space for you and it can raise the level of living for you, your immediate family, and the extended community.
So this is going to lead me to my third question here. What does the emergence of Fintech mean in terms of jobs and careers for black males in either industry that you guys are all representing?
I would say that, in today's world, whenever you want to find something, people go to the internet, whether it's your local baker or Apple or Dell or any of the financial institutions. So there are skills needed to keep all those websites running. There are skills needed to design those websites. So that's where the intersection of financial transactions, whether you're buying goods and services, and the technology that is used to present you those goods and services. That's just critical. I mean, if you're in business today, you cannot be in business and not have a presence on the internet. And so therefore, you need those financial skills to do your transactions, and you need those technical skills to keep your profile running successfully. And so it's not a how, it's a matter of survival.
So Fintech really represents an entrepreneurial opportunity where black men, black women for that matter, are uniquely qualified at addressing a challenge that financial services firms have overall. Meaning, the average American does not save enough. So although we have one of the greatest wealth factories in terms of how this country runs, we just generally do not save. And as always, the African American population is going to have even higher stats that are negative. So if the average American doesn't save enough, well then the average African American even saves less. So that means that you're uniquely qualified at understanding a very specific challenge that the major corporations have. Now, with Fintech, we now have access to technology in a way that has never existed before. And we're experts at a problem that major companies have not been able to figure out. So that means that we can start to think about, whether it be within our churches, fraternities, and sororities, what are the differences in how we can behave, and then what's the way to put a technology solution around that difference, and can we do it at scale? So within my chapter, I'm an alpha, and within my chapter in Newark, New Jersey, economic empowerment has been a big part of what we've talked about. So one of the undergrad brothers is starting to drive a paraphernalia company. I've invested in that company because I need to invest in him. I think the notion is, how do I turn him into a millionaire? How do we create multiple millionaires within the same economic power that we already have, and then leverage technology, wrap a platform around that, and then sell that or partner with the major corporations? So yes, some of this is how do we get into the big companies, but also we can create solutions so that we can partner with those companies and become enterprises on our own. So just understand, the challenge that we have is also the blessing if you reframe how you think about it and have an optimistic expectation of how you can move yourself forward.
So we talked about the basics, we talked about the opportunities, but here's something we should also think about. Think big. This is an opportunity for disruption. If you just look at, history, think about, technology, and technology, whether it was steam, electricity, the client PC, and a few others, huge fortunes were made. Not only huge fortunes were made, industries and lives, the way we work, live, and play, were forever changed. So if you think about it, back to the unique perspective, this is a window where by utilizing technology, by utilizing the insights, by utilizing things that only we really know, there's an opportunity to not only fundamentally change the game, there's an opportunity to dramatically disrupt. And as the other two panelists have mentioned, do something for ourselves, our communities, and the economic communities that surround us that will forever change the trajectory of what we have today.
So we talk about, doing things for our community empowerment, taking disadvantages and essentially turning them into competitive advantages, right? That leads me to my next question of, what are the issues that need to be addressed when it comes to getting young black males into the pipeline for career consideration, one, but also preparation for the necessary careers in technology and financial services? A lot of times we hear people say, hey, I can get people of color into the door, but we also need to start having a conversation about what does it look like for once they're in the door to stay inside of that organization and actually start growing. So can you tell me a little bit about what your personal opinions are, what are you thinking about? How do we prepare our community for these careers, and then how do we give them the necessary training in order to grow and advance themselves once they get their foot into the opportunity?
So at Apple, we have a big push on attraction of talent and also retention of talent, which is what you're referring to. And I think the attraction is, as was mentioned earlier by some of the panelists, is that the black male has navigated through multiple challenges throughout American society. And so if you want people who can overcome challenges, who are driven, who are committed, black males, black females, that community thrives no matter what obstacles put in front of them. So we need to leverage that. I mean, that's a huge skill set that I don't know that corporations as a whole have recognized, and we need to make sure they start recognizing that. Two, once we get those talented folks into our companies, then we need to make sure that we provide them a foundation of support that allows them to thrive and achieve the levels of success they deserve. At Apple, we have an organization called Black at Apple, and it's all the Apple employees who are black or who have an affinity towards the challenges and issues of black people. And so we're building that so that we have over 1,000 members now, and it's growing as we speak. Part of the people that are here today are part of Black at Apple. I'm the co-executive sponsor. But we have that to say, hey, we can make this a comfortable home for you. You have a safe space. You can come learn about the culture of the corporation so that you can have success. And then the third part of my answer would be, you have to understand the culture of the corporation you're in. So All the learning you did in education, all the learning you did through your life experiences, learn the corporation as well so that you can successfully navigate through that corporation, knowing their culture and their language and their style.
Yeah, makes sense. So I think there's three components to that response, Evan. One, at Prudential, we talk about bringing our full authentic self to work. And that statement sounds great, but if you have been for decades or maybe a lifetime not bringing your authentic self, that's not an easy thing to do. I think particularly if you're at the senior level, you're going to have to start to think back of, I just heard, Nesby mentioned. When I was in college, National Society of Black Engineers was the first place that I had a leadership position. I was a president of a chapter. I had to speak. I had to do things that I didn't have to do before. And when I think back now, I have not been active in NSB since I've graduated. So a strategic dialogue with the NSB organization, a strategic dialogue with all of the fraternities. I mean, when you think about black men, all of the fraternities require you to be in college to even get in. So you have a very rich source of educated people in the demographic that you say you care about. And by the way, those same individuals tend to be leaders in the same corporations. We need to start to connect those dots. So when we think about this notion of our authentic self, we need to start to say that, in fact, not just sponsoring a NSB event, not just sponsoring a fraternity event, but having a strategic conversation on, you've got members in your organization that we need in our company. What are we going to do differently on how we make that happen? I think the second part is, Evan, the company that you have. When I was preparing for the remarks for this event, and I was looking through all of the bios of all of the panelists and the moderator, I see that there's New York on technology. And when I looked through the website, it amazed me the kind of work that they were doing. And this is an example of action that needs to be taken. So instead of just reading the information and then maybe having a nice conversation with Evan, I shot him a note this morning and I said, what you're doing in New York, I'm ashamed. I need to be doing it in Newark. Please let me know how I can do it. I've got alphas who will be ready to help. And then Evan replies, would love to help. And by the way, I'm an alpha. So, so then you have these scenarios where instead of holding that information back, you actually incorporate that into your professional dialogue, and you realize that there's an opportunity to drive scale. Then the next is courage. We've got to be able to take that conversation to the board, to the more senior levels, and say, yes, I know we're pleased and not satisfied. Yes, I know we can do more. Or all of the nice phrases we have in corporate America when, quite frankly, we're not doing what we need to do. Now we need to start to say the opportunity to do it differently is right here, but you have to take action. There's no way I can do this from a distance. So because I've already been engaged in the community, because I have a frat brother who's running a nonprofit organization and has big six consulting skills behind it, I've got an opportunity for a strategic dialogue on the action that we can take because I brought my authentic self to the table. But again, it still begins with you all. If you're not showing up for these programs, if you're not demanding the programs, if you're not expecting us to mentor you, advocate for you, and push you forward, then it doesn't work. So your push for what you expect is as important as the work we have to do. But there's a lot of opportunity in front of us. I can tell you that Evan and I will be speaking later on today because we need to do this work in Newark. And by the way, we're in all of the major cities, Atlanta, Houston, San Francisco. There's not a major city that we don't exist in. There's not a major city that we don't run socially. Now we need to start to run the business of those major cities.
So, love some of the commentaries about how we bring people in. Love the boardroom conversation. Here's a little known fact that most people don't realize. We have a diversity council at Dell. Do you want to guess who runs it? Michael himself. That just tells you how important it is. Now again, even we say internally that we could do a lot better, but here are some of the things that we are doing. One is, as I joked earlier, we metric everything. And so we're looking not just at who we're bringing in, but also who do we have across the entire pipeline. Our HR team is here. They can tell you every single senior leader by race, type, segmentation. They can tell you what each of those leaders are doing internally and externally to make sure we're doing that. But you've also got to surround folks with the right ecosystem. Right ecosystems could be everything from an inside, we call our version an ERG, which is Employee Resource Group, and ours is referred to as BNA. And the net, as a matter of fact, there's multiple BNA members here. But it's not just having the ERG. It's the fact of even outside of work, we all get together and we have conversations what we can do. We get together with local chapters and see what else can be done. It kind of gives people a way to say, hey, you know what? It is okay to be your authentic self. You can have these conversations. I had one person approach me the other day and wanted to have, not that I'm an expert, a financial technology conversation. We sat down for an hour over beer and just had a discussion around what were the thoughts. So you got to bring them in. You got to nurture them. You got to make sure that, in essence, they've got a support group, but then you got to hang on to them. Because that's where we run into a lot of issues. We'll bring people in and, yeah, they're early in their careers, but what are we doing to ensure that they stay? What are we doing to make sure they thrive? And what are we doing to eventually make sure that they not only become the leaders of the company, but they become the leaders of their economic communities, cities, and in some cases, entire geographic regions. So again, we got to have this, for lack of a better term, a life cycle view. Yeah. How do you get people in? How do you make sure that they're nurtured? How do you make sure they stay? And then what are we doing to make sure that we've got the right things in place so they can grow, they can thrive, they can be their authentic self, and they can be leaders? And as Deli mentioned, that's not only on us, but it's on all of us to make sure that that's really happening.
So we have about 3 minutes left before I turn it over to the audience for Q&A. So I encourage you all to start gathering your questions before we turn it over to our panel, because you all are dropping a lot of knowledge today. But before I do that, I want to take us a little deeper as I enter my final question for the panel. What programs/proven approaches work or show promise when it comes to increasing opportunity and representation for Black males? And most importantly, as we look out into the audience, we see our community here in full force. What could we be doing collectively as a community to ensure that we're continuously elevating and help support those positive outcomes that you're going to be discussing right now?
So I would say that the programs that we're working on, we mentioned Apple has a relationship with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. We're connected to 14 HBCUs. We've had 34 interns this past summer. This is the third summer we've had interns on campus. So that's a pipeline of talent that has not been aggressively researched and should be, and we're doing that today. Last week I was at a well-respected HBCU for engineering, supply chain, operations, and finance in North Carolina. So, we're off doing that today to fill that pipeline. I mentioned the K through 12 efforts we have earlier. We got some relationships with some of the schools in Oakland. Some of the other panelists mentioned Apple's in every city in the world, right? So what can we collectively do to do that is that tell folks to say, hey, there's opportunity at Apple, pursue it. Come knock on the doors. Reach out to those of us who you know that are at Apple so we can get you connected to people who may be able to get you an opportunity. It's a collective effort. It's not a one-way street. We, as a community, I think should not limit ourselves to say this is unachievable. It is achievable. We're witness to that. We're examples of that. The people in the room are examples of that. So let's reach for the sky, and I think we can get there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's twofold. From a corporate perspective, there are deep pockets in corporations, and sponsorship of events like this is exactly what we need to do, right? So I'm very proud of the fact that Prudential is typically at the forefront of sponsoring a Black enterprise event. There's an organization called Caliber, which is a subset of the Executive Leadership Corporation, and we sponsor that. We're title sponsors for that. So I think our sponsorship and our presence from a recruitment perspective is key, but in terms of what we can do, it's direct advocacy. So when I'm sitting in the room and we're talking about the next set of talent, I have to take accountability for lack of diversity. I can't look to the left or look to the right and say it's the man. I'm actually the man, right? So I actually have to take accountability for who is being sponsored, not just recommended, but sponsored and advocated for. Oftentimes, we don't get what I call the benefit of the doubt. Meaning, if we don't have 100% of the experience, 100% of the education, 100% of all of the prerequisites, then there's a waiting game that goes on, and our other counterparts get more of the benefit of the doubt. We need to speak up for that benefit of the doubt, because at the end of the day, when you get an Evan who can make it to the next level, that can open up the door for the next 10, for the next 20. So direct advocacy is going to be important. Again, what I'd say to you all in the room, when someone advocates for you, you need to knock it out, right? You need to be on point. You need to hold yourself accountable for that performance. I make sure that we have great representation in all of the summer internship programs. But I also bring those interns in, and I bring them in the room, and I said, do not let me down. You need to get here early, you need to be focused, you need to be excellent, and you need to expect that I'm going to advocate for you. So it's really all about the action that we take.
Like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that are not only going on, whether it's the 40-ish some odd young men that we've just brought in from NSBE, whether it's the things we're doing with HCBUs. I mentioned the fact of, even from a technology perspective, there are folks who traditionally have not had access to technology, and with things like our projects, both Immersion and Align, we're looking to do that. But one other thing that we can do is we collectively need to do a much better job. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I joined Dell a few years ago, back to the advocacy piece, I actually had a whole bunch of folks reach out to me. And we had the frank conversation of, there aren't a lot of us senior leadership team. You've made it here. We are here to help support you. And you know what? I've been doing that for the last 4 years myself. So similar to the discussion of, when you find that you're the only person in the room, don't do it for doing it. Do it because it needs to be done. Do it for the right folks. Make sure that everybody is aligned. And let's, frankly, just link arms and lift each other up.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I want to have the audience help me say thank you to you as we transition to Q&A. So please help me give our panel a big round of applause. With that said, I believe we have time for about 3 to 4 questions. There should be someone in the audience that has a microphone, and we're going to put a few minutes on the clock, and I'll keep track of that. And so put your hands up, and then someone should be walking around with a mic, and we'll get to those questions.
Yes, sir. Forgive me. I'm over here. So my name is Tequila Sellers.
Oh.
I actually work for the Department of Defense, the National Intelligence Agency. My IC community, I know we have been talking about corporate, private, but this is a federal IC agency that I work for. I also come to you asking you for help and assistance. I hire, research, go out to the HBCUs, all the universities that the agency allows me to go to advocate for black females, black males, Hispanics, of color, to come to the agency. We have 75% white males at the agency, and I'm advocating for us. I'm pushing, I'm hitting the ground running. My question to you is, as I'm pushing them to let me bring in all this talent and knowledge that we have, how do I avoid being blackballed? I get invited to the party, but I don't get invited to dance. So I'm sitting at the table, but I'm not able to ask questions. If I do proceed to push the ticket, I'm no longer allowed.
Let me get one of the panelists to answer that, so we can, just one.
That's a very difficult dynamic, and it's one that is a very real one. One of the things that I look to do in scenarios like that is to identify at least one person in that senior leadership rank that has an authentic support for the cause. Then I also look to understand, well, what is the business agenda at hand? What is the challenge that the organization is actually going through? And how do I make sure that I'm driving solutions against that challenge with the very talent in question? Because at the end of the day, it's not diversity for the sake of diversity. It's the notion that a diverse mix of great resources makes a company stronger and able to outperform against its normal circumstance. So then, what challenge are they talking about? What is the conversation that is going on that you can't speak to directly? And then, more importantly, what solution do you have in mind that you'd like to volunteer for? And then, what talent are we bringing to the table to drive solutions against that? So I think it becomes a matter of, well, what is the agenda that they do care about? How do we have a relevant voice in that agenda? And then how are we strategically using that same talent that they may be skeptical about to solve the very problems that they're faced with on a day in and day out basis?
I would say just that the business case solution is key. When it's important to the business, it'll be important to them.
Thank you.
And by the way, proof points are the other piece. So what's the business case? What's the value prop? But real-world examples of where a difference has been made, that's how you start to affect the change. That's how you start to build other advocates, and that's how you start that flywheel starting to turn, where people go, maybe this is the right path, and by the way, I should be part of that solution.
We have 40 seconds. Clap it up. Maybe we have time to grab one more. We have
All right.
40 seconds.
Yeah, hello and thank you, gentlemen. My name is Dr. Jeremy Welland. I work in Fintech at a company called PayPal. We have some folks here today. We're happy to be a sponsor. And I just had a comment and a quick question. So, one of our 4 core values is inclusion. Our mission is to democratize financial services, broaden it for underserved communities. We're doing a lot to try to close the pay gap by having a pay equity exercise internally. And we're also launching products and partnerships to try to help Black Americans and even the African diaspora. So I guess the question I would have is, over the next decade, where do you see the greatest impact of what we can do in the fintech industry to serve underserved communities?
Gentlemen, we actually are out of time, so I ask you to hold, your replies. What I do encourage everyone in the room to do is that in a few minutes, our panelists are going to be out in the crowd, so take the opportunity to connect with them one-on-one, but we want to be respectful of the event and the time, so I ask that we just give a round of applause, and then we depart off the stage.
All right, good job.